of March 2024. I am Councillor Phil Rogers and I will be chairing this meeting. Please could you ensure that your phones are switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. In addition, when asked to raise your hand, if members who are virtually viewing this meeting could raise your electronic hand, and for members who are in the council chamber, just raise your hand. On to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any other declarations of interest, please? I can't see any. Thank you very much, everyone. Let's move along. Item 3, as pre-decision scrutiny, we're now moving to the Cabinet Board agenda. Agenda item 5, the revenue budget proposals for 2024-2025. They're on pages 3 to 102 of the Cabinet Board papers. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
No, thank you, Chair. I think we'll move straight to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. We'll move to members' questions now. First indication I have who wants to speak is Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Thank you. My question's in relation to the difference in calculation of net income of council tax between the December budget report that went out for consultation and the report in front of us today. Members will note that the budget gap's reduced by about 230,000 between those two reports following the consultation, but the level of council tax required to close the gap has decreased from about 10.3% to the 7.9 figure we've got now, which is quite a large reduction. Using the original figures that were in that December report, I would have sort of expected a figure of about 9.9% today to close the gap. So, the net figure for the income of every 1% council tax increase has gone up between those two reports from about 670,000 to about 850. So we're seeing more income than expected. And obviously the result of that on this current report is that there's about 1.3 million, I think, difference between the two, which is quite a high level of uncertainty really between that December consultation report and the report we've got in front of us today. So I just wondered if either the Chief Finance Officer or the Cabinet Member for Finance could explain the background between the calculations carried out in both those reports, and then perhaps outline what measures might be taken to ensure that the forecasting of that income is as accurate as possible.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. I'll hand over to Hugh at this point, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Percy. I think that's a really good question, and I think on the face of it, you can understand why it looks like a bit of an anomaly. So I think the first point to make really is that the draft budget proposals refer to the fact that council tax could increase by approximately 10%. So there was no actual specific proposal in there to say we had to increase council tax by X amount to close the budget gap. The reason that there is a significant difference relates to assumptions around the council tax support scheme. So as you know, when we raise council tax, obviously 1 in 5 people in the County Borough Council is entitled to council tax support. So whilst income goes up, costs go up, and as you referred to, there's that concept of net council tax increases. So when I put the draft proposals together back in December, I put a prudent worst case scenario estimate in for the increased cost of council tax support, which I thought to be prudent at the time. At the point when the final proposals came forward, what we were able to do then is actually plug the figures into the academy system, which is the system we use to run council tax. That then gives us an actual cost in terms of council tax support, and that calculation takes into account things like changes to Department of Work and Pension benefits and things like that. So there's a whole number of detailed calculations that only that computer system can actually do, and it can only do it once actually. So at the point in time where we put the draft proposals together, there was a very prudent estimate that the net council tax would be at a low level, and the final proposals are actually reflecting the fact that the CTRS council tax reduction scheme costs are going to be significantly less. So hopefully, whilst that's a very technical explanation, it does explain the difference between a could be 10% increase down to a 7.9. I am confident that the estimates contained within the report are prudent, and that we'll be able to achieve that 7.9% council tax and still provide council tax support to all claimants going forward. In terms of your second part of the question, I suppose, is it appropriate to take a worst case scenario at the draft budget proposal times? Personally, as a Section 151 officer, I prefer to be prudent. I'd rather be doing it that way around than coming back to members at a final budget stage and saying, whoops, I wasn't prudent enough, I have to increase the council tax. But I will look with colleagues in revenues to look and see if there are any more detailed ways we can do something around providing a more accurate estimate at that budget set-in stage, Councillor Percy. So hopefully that answered your question. As I say, I know it's a bit of a technical answer, but hopefully that explains it and gives some assurance that the proposals are robust going forward. So diolch. Thank you very much.
Many thanks, Hugh. Councillor Percy, would you like to respond?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, and thanks Hugh for the explanation there. I think just in terms of the sort of figures I quoted, obviously I wasn't quoting directly from the report there, but they were the calculations I did based on the net council tax income and the gap that was in the report. So I was just using the figures that were presented to us there to kind of illustrate the point, I suppose. I think the sort of the follow-up I'd have on that point was, is there any way we can actually run that report that we've run now at the time? You mentioned it can only be run once. Is there some sort of technical barrier that stops us running it at an earlier stage to have a more accurate figure? And I think the only other thing I'd add is where sort of a worst case scenario is being presented in the budget report, I think it would be quite helpful for members to be made aware of what the uncertainty might be in some of those figures, because it wasn't really caveated in the report, I suppose, that that net council tax income figure was an estimate, perhaps not based on the data that we're using now. So I think it would be very helpful if that was made clear in any future reports. And I think the other thing that perhaps prompts the question that I've asked today is the fact that in the current report we've got now, it doesn't really outline that change between the two. It's kind of hidden in a lot of figures. And I understand it's probably quite a complicated thing to present because it's kind of within the net council tax figure. But I think it would be very helpful, because actually the table you've included in this budget report that shows the differences was really helpful. But what it didn't include was this particular difference between the two reports. And I think in future budgets, if we could have any other changes in terms of, assumptions and calculations, would be really good. Because, like, for example, when we changed the council tax collection rate percentage previously, it was really clear. We've changed it from 97 to 98, and here's your extra income. So I hope that all made sense, Chair, and I appreciate perhaps a tiny bit more clarification and assurance.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Percy. I'll bring Hugh back in at this point again, please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. So the first point in terms of a technical barrier relates to the fact that we need to wait for the Academy software providers, Capita, to actually load into their system all the various benefit changes and things like that for the following year. So it isn't possible to do it at a December point in time to run it through the system. But as I said, there may be ways and means that I can work with colleagues in my revenue section to look at more accurate ways of doing that. In terms of your worst case scenario and actually being explicit, take the point on board totally, and I'm happy to take that going forward in the way we present reports in the future. If I refer back to the scrutiny meeting last year, there were sort of comments made around requiring more detail and references and things like that, which I hopefully took on board for this year. So I will certainly take those points on board. And if I'm here next year presenting a report, I will make sure that they are included, Councillor Percy. So I hope that gives you some assurance, or reassurance rather. Thank you.
Many thanks, Hugh. Councillor Percy, are you happy with the response?
Yeah, that does provide me with reassurance. Diolch, Hugh. Hope to see you next year.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Next up, I have Councillor Rebecca Phillips, please. Just checking. Councillor Rebecca Phillips?
Yeah, good afternoon, Chair. Sorry, I'm not sure whether you can quite hear me. Just regarding the number of responses, how does that compare to last year's consultation? And is there any way of increasing participation? For example, looking at what other LAs are doing? Diolch, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. Can I bring Anita in on this one, please?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Phillips. So, so last year, between the paper and the online questionnaires, we had 581 completed questionnaires. That compares to 556 this year. And we also received 13 responses by email or letter compared to 6 this year. And we engaged last year with 225 Neath Talbot Council employees last year compared to 146 this year, and spoke to 147 people during meetings last year compared to 52 this year. So all in all, during the budget consultation, we heard from a total of 966 people last year and 76 this year. So that is, down on numbers. We were down by 76 printed questionnaires compared to last year. So we had 21 this year and 97 last year. And that is probably due to some of the venues being closed for the Christmas period. So I hope that answers your question on how the responses compare. Yes, certainly in terms of working with other councils, yes, that's a really good suggestion. And I am part of a working group at the moment looking at citizens' surveys with other councils. So I'll certainly take that forward. Also, I think in terms of increasing participation levels, last year we did run the consultation for 22 days. It was 1 day longer. So that I would say that's sort of negligible in terms of the timescales. But it didn't run over Christmas last year. That was out of our hands a bit this year because in terms of the provisional local government settlement announcement. So depending on when it runs and the timescales, one of the other things we would look to do is to get into some community events if they fit in with the timescales. That would be a way to encourage more responses because it's a chance really to engage with people face to face and explain to them why their feedback is so important. And we're also in the midst of a recruitment drive for the Citizens Panel at present, and we have seen more activity with them on recent activities. So that hopefully will help. And we're also doing some work with our community of practice on a stakeholder map that we did to update and extend that. So hopefully that will contribute to helping with our reach and the number of responses as well. So that answers your question, Councillor.
Thank you, Anita. Councillor Phillips, would you like to come back?
Thank you, diolch. Yeah, I'm obviously concerned regarding targeting the younger generation as well. So I don't know if there's work to be done on, more work to be done on social media regarding. I know there's obviously been advances in technology and the ways that you can engage with people these days. So I'm happy to work with officers on that for next year's budget and any consultation. I just think we need to maybe revamp the way we do things. So, but thank you, diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Phillips. We'll take on board your comments. Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Rob Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. I may need to go to different officers in order to elicit a response. First one is for Hugh. Hugh, can you remind me of what the limits for virement are, please?
Hugh?
The in-year limits for virement are up to £250 to £100,000 for corporate directors, 250 for cabinet, and £500,000 for council. I would say. I'm looking across to Craig, see if he can confirm.
Yeah, I believe you're right there, Hugh.
Thank you. So following on from that question, 2.8 million was put into a revenue fund in relation to energy efficiencies for civic buildings and schools in the 23-24 budget. Out of that 2.8 million, 1.5 has been spent on one-off payments to both the Environment Directorate and Education. That left a balance of 1.5, which now appears to have been wired into a capital programme going forward. Could you tell me when that decision was taken and who authorised it, please?
Hugh?
I'm not sure I follow those numbers, to be honest, Councillor Jones. The 2.8 million remains within the 2023-24 revenue budget where it was approved in the first place. It's not been vied anywhere else within 2023-24. The 2024-25 proposals include removal of that budget, so not a viement, because a viement would be something that happens during the year. So there was no viement during 23-24 for that £2.8 million. As you say, 1.5 million was spent in terms of providing the contribution to schools and environment. 700k has been contributed to reserves, and is £600,000 underspent on that budget. So there's been no viements during the year in relation to that £2.8 million.
Thank you, Hugh. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, that's not the information that I was provided with, and I think that we need to take that outside of this meeting, and I'll contact you, because I was given the information that 1.5 was spent on 721,000 going to education and the rest going to environment, leaving a balance of 1.3 in that account. And it appeared then that monies were actually transferred into a capital project from a revenue project. But I'll take that outside the meeting. If I can ask Mr. Thomas, Andrew, a question.
No problem, Councillor Jones.
As a result of that one-off payment, Mr. Thomas, the Education Directorate received £721,000 as a one-off payment to assist with fuel poverty in schools. I know that the Education Department undertook a canvass of all schools throughout the county borough, and I was quite surprised to find out that energy costs for all the schools were totaling £4.7 million. So therefore, on a pro rata basis, education worked out the spend, and I was grateful that the example that you provided to me as to the rationale in relation to that. My concern here is in relation to schools' delegated budgets, which, as we know, going past has been sacrosanct in relation to schools unable to be touched by the local authority. But I'm really concerned that £6 million plus at this moment in time potentially will end up as a £2.9 million deficit to schools. Are we therefore looking that we're not funding schools going forward in a sufficient level that we will encourage fuel poverty and an inability to deliver the school development plan, where the reserves are being wiped out, and school development plan is normally the pot that schools will go to in order to facilitate the school development plan? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Andrew, please.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor Jones. The first thing I would say is I certainly share concerns around the levels of deficits that are in some schools. It's not every school by any means, but there are a growing number of schools who are in a deficit position. Every school who's in a deficit position at the moment has a recovery plan, and some of those are more challenging than others in terms of, you know, when they will get back to a balanced budget, if that is possible. I'm not quite sure of the link in terms of the question around energy. If I just sort of tell everybody what we did with school budgets around energy costs. In last year's delegated schools quantum, which is the total amount of money we give to schools in the delegated budget, we uplifted the budgets of the year before by 50%. Now, I think, you know, a year ago, almost to the day, we spoke about how that is unlikely to cover actual costs in the financial year 23-24, because we were anticipating energy costs at that time to be as much as 153. We used, I think, 153% as a you know, sort of upper limit, worst case scenario, if you like, which is why we had the reserve amount and the exercise we did in January just gone about what the actual spend is proposed to be, and that's the £4.7 million that I furnished you with, and then schools were topped up on a pro rata basis. Costs of fuel in schools are certainly higher than what was put in the delegated schools budget, even with the top up. So the top up didn't meet the actual costs of fuel, you know, gas and electricity. So the shortfall in funding on that particular line would contribute to the overall overspend that you spoke about in terms of having £6.5 million if you like, in the bank, and then a projected deficit position for all schools. Obviously, there's differences within that, but all schools being in a deficit position of about £2.8 million. Some of that overspend is due to schools still spending their reserves on COVID recovery, which is right and proper. And some of that overspend is because schools are struggling to balance their budgets because of the costs of that they're incurring in particular around pupils with additional learning needs. So that sort of picture varies. But I certainly am concerned about the level of funding, and this is something we've discussed in corporate directors many times, and it is why in this year's proposals for the budget we've got a line in for TA funding of £750,000 additional this year. And at the moment there is a proposal, and obviously it's still only proposal for the forthcoming financial year because it hasn't been agreed yet, to keep increasing that particular line in the budget by £750,000 each year for the next 4 years. Yeah, 4 years. Now, whether that's affordable going forward, of course, it remains to be seen. But that line in the budget and schools budget is one of particular concern, because that really is where schools are feeling the greatest pinch, alongside energy, alongside unfunded pay increases, and in particular teachers in that respect.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Jones, would you like to respond?
Yeah, again, thank you, Chair. It's been brought to my attention on one particular school that they started the year 23-24 with a £12,000 positive balance, reserves, whatever you want to call it, into their account, and the projection as of the 31st of March of this year is a £95,000 deficit. That's not sustainable in education, and going forward they start with a £95,000 deficit. That'll be affected by this budget, and you're already alluding to the fact that you don't think that there is, or you have concern, shall I say, that there is insufficient monies to be able to sustain that level of debt, particularly if it's going to be multiplied across the whole county borough. And I've got serious reservations that whilst we're only losing 6 vacancies to redundancies, either through unfilled posts across the county borough or looking to fill those posts with grant monies. The redundancies in schools, because it's always been badged that they are appointed by governing bodies, that therefore they don't meet the tallies in relation to council employees. But if this level of debt is going to be reflected because of the way that this budget is being drafted and set, with the amounts of monies that are actually being allocated to each different directorate, I can see severe losses in relation to our education, teaching staff and non-teaching staff, because schools are not going to be able to afford to employ them. Have you any comment in relation to that? And I leave it then at that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Andrew?
Obviously, just in terms of the individual school you talk about, I don't know which school that is, and if those figures are correct, then that school then will need to come in and work out a recovery plan. But the bigger picture is, you're absolutely right. There are concerns. This is a pan-Wales issue. That doesn't make it any better in Neath, Talbot, but I think it is important that members understand that this isn't a specific issue for Neath, Talbot. And it is something that we are going to have to try and manage as we go forward, because ultimately schools being in significant deficits will cause us a risk issue as a council. The variety of surplus to deficit is quite staggering across the council, in terms of some schools have significant surplus and some have significant deficit. There are always good reason for that. Sometimes a school finds itself in those circumstances because of particular issues to do with additional costs that they couldn't have foreseen, around safeguarding and such things. And we have helped in the past when that has happened. But it is an ongoing concern, and it's something that we will be picking up as a corporate directors team, something that the chief exec wants to bring forward, and we call them sustainability reviews, and we're going to be looking at all our significant services to understand the risk and to try and mitigate those risks as we go forward. But yes, it's an ongoing concern.
Thank you, Andrew. Did you have anything else, Councillor Jones?
No, I may want to come back after other people have spoken, sir.
Lovely, thank you. Do we have any other comments on item 5, please? I can't see any, so we'll move now to the recommendations. The recommendation is listed on page 31 and 32 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose it. Can I have a seconder, please?
Second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Henton. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain? I can't.
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
Chair, I can see 5 indications to the contrary, so 5 votes against, but I can confirm that the recommendation is supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison.
Apologies, Chair, it's gone up to 6 against.
6
The
again.
recommendation is still supported to Cabinet, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you all. Moving along to agenda item 6. This is the capital strategy and capital programme for 2024-25 up to 26-27, listed on pages 103 to 122. Officers, would you like to add anything additional to the report?
No, thank you, Chair. Once again, happy to go straight to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. We'll go to questions now. First indication I have is from Councillor Sean Percy, please.
Dear Cadeirydd, thank you. Yeah, I've got some questions in relation to items in the Environment Directorate. I did circulate these via email to the directors. I'm hoping Nicola may be able to give some insight on them today, if possible. The first thing that I noticed in this report is the Levelling Up Fund projects don't include the 2 additional schemes in Port Talbot that were announced earlier on in the year. So I'm wondering if there's a reason why they're omitted from the capital programme at the moment. I've then got a bunch of other questions, Chair, that are quite minor. Shall I take them one at a time?
Yeah, we'll take, thank you, Councillor Percy. We'll take them one at a time, if that's okay. Nicola, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the way that the Levelling Up funding is managed by UK government, they advise you whether or not your bid submission has been successful. And in this case, we were successful under round 3 for a scheme to improve the theatre within the Princess Royal building, the Civic Square outside and the link down the Riverside area under one project. And then we had a transport project, which was the New Bridge Road Bridge project, which forms part of quite a strategic active travel route. So we've had confirmation that those bids were successful. What we've not had yet from UK government is that formal funding agreement. So until we've had that, we can't incorporate it within our capital programme. It was the same under round 2 when we secured funding for the heritage corridor scheme. So we are advised it's just a formality, but until we have that confirmation that the funding has been allocated, we can't include it within our programme. But we've started working at risk on it anyway. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Percy?
Yeah, no, thanks for that. That's a bit reassuring. I was just a little bit worried that perhaps you know, we'd been unable to make some of those timescales, but I've noticed that a little bit of activity around the New Bridge scheme as well. So that's great. There were just a couple of specific items that I just wasn't sure what they actually related to, and I wondered if perhaps you might be able to give me some clarity on. There's 2 items in there relating to the PDR, one network management and one dock road feeder bridge. And then there's another item under other regeneration schemes, and I'm just interested what's included within those items.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. We come back to Nicola then, please.
Yeah, in terms of the PDR, we are undertaking works of repair around the roundabout in Margam next to the works entrance, because there's some damage to the carriageway there, which is quite critical in terms of requiring repair work. And in terms of the dock road feeder bridge, we are undertaking minor concrete repairs and improvements, repairs to the barriers there. The funding for that came out of the original funding we secured from the EU when we actually developed the PDR. So we developed PDR, we kept money back as a contingency to deal with all the CPO issues that we had to deal with at the time, and to deal with any issues that arose after the scheme was finished. So those works referred to are being paid for out of what is left from that PDR pot. In terms of the regeneration schemes, you know, for the big schemes, we list them individually, but you'll appreciate we do little small schemes across the county borough, which are relatively small sums of money. So we've grouped all of those schemes together under one sort of banner. Now, we can probably issue you a list of those projects after this meeting is finished to give you that level of detail, but I don't have the level of detail and how much we spend on each of those little projects to hand. But as I say, we can circulate that after the meeting if it's of interest to you. But it's all the small projects grouped together.
Thank you, Nicola. Yeah, I would like that as well, Nicola. If you could arrange that, I'd be very grateful, please. Councillor Percy, would you like to come back in?
Yes, please, Chair. And there's a couple of other minor points to bring up as well. No, thanks for that, Nicola. I would definitely appreciate the list of those schemes. Obviously, we are looking to approve the programme in the next day or two, so we'd be very interested to know what is included within that. In terms of a couple of other items, the Neath Transport Hub spending's been sort of reallocated or maybe pushed back a little bit. There's a mention there about site relocation issues and works ongoing around this. Obviously, we had an update in Scrutiny a little while ago on the project. Is there anything significant to report on there in terms of those changes to the project?
Yeah, Nicola, if you come back in, please.
Yeah. There are no significant changes in terms of that project. We're doing site investigation works in the area this month. They started on Saturday and they should be concluded by the end of March, which is when we had to use the funding for those works. So what we'll be doing next is working on the detailed design for the scheme with a view to taking it through the planning process, and obviously developing the engagement strategy with the businesses to ensure that we can actually deliver the scheme within that particular area. But so there are no significant deviations from our original plan.
Thank you, Nicola. Councillor Percy?
Thank you. No, that's really helpful to know there. That's great. I've got two more and then I'll be done, Chair. So
okay, no worries.
There was an item in there around the former yacht building, which I think is the youth offending team building adjacent to the magistrates court. Is that another sort of office-based scheme that we're looking to deliver there? So be interested to know that. And I might as well ask the last question, is around capital allocation for refurbishment of playgrounds. I understand some of that has been undertaken in the last financial year from some of the clean-up, green-up funding, but it hasn't really been specifically kind of itemised in the capital programme. So is there any capital allocation for parks and playgrounds specifically in this capital programme? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Back to you, Nicola, please.
Yeah. In terms of the youth offending team building, as you know, the building is located in the Harbourside area. We are purchasing and refurbishing that building on a speculative basis because we know there is significant demand for high quality office accommodation, especially in that area. You'll be aware that we secured a company known as Keytree to the building next door, which is the former magistrates court. They've been taken over by Deloitte, and Deloitte have ambitions to expand their operations in this area because of the very the good accessibility that site has. You can effectively jump on a train, get off the train in Talbot Parkway, and you'll be behind your desk within minutes. Because of that interest and the demand for floor space in these really key locations, we're confident that we can purchase, refurbish and possibly expand that building, and we can get an occupier in very quickly. So that's the update on that building. In terms of the playgrounds, we did have an allocation under clean up, green up as part of the capital programme last year. As part of that, there was a sum of money identified for improvements to playgrounds, and that included fencing repairs and improvements, footpath repairs and improvements, as well as replacement of priority pieces of equipment within the playgrounds. So a programme of work has been developed for playgrounds around the county borough. We anticipate that that work is going to be complete by the end of this month. However, the works that are planned down on the Aberavon Seafront playground are slightly delayed, and they won't be complete until around May. But as far as we're concerned, those are the only sort of delays in terms of that allocation. We don't have an allocation specifically for improvements to playgrounds under this year's proposed capital programme, but we will continue to maintain the assets that we've got. Hopefully that clarifies your query.
Many thanks, Nicola, for answering all those queries. Councillor Percy, you happy with that? Thanks.
Yeah, that does clarify my questions on both those counts. Diolch. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Percy. Councillor Rob Jones, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just clarity that on the responses that you've given. As far as the PDR road is concerned, you've said near the entrance to Tata. Can I just clarify? It's the Crem Road. Is it the rippling effect that's been taking place on the west and eastbound carriageway that needs repairing?
Nicola?
I would be making it up if I said that that is exactly what I'm talking about. I've been told that it's on the Margam roundabout at the entrance to the works. Now, I can find out the specifics for you, Councillor Jones, and I'll come back to you. I would be fibbing if I said, yes, you're spot on.
I'm just trying to decide whether I've got another problem near the entrance or it's the rippling. It's probably the rippling effect, which is more towards the Margam roundabout as opposed to the Tata roundabout. And I'm so glad that Councillor Percy raised the Newbridge Bridge monies, because half of it sits in his ward and half of it sits in mine, and it's long overdue. So thank you for the work that's been done to secure the funding for that.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Are there any other questions on this item, please? I can't see any other indications. Okay, then. We'll go to the recommendation. The recommendation is listed on page 111 to 112 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose it. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Henton. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can't see any indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendation is supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Alison. Agenda item 7, Treasury Management Strategy, Annual Investment Strategy and Minimum Revenue Provision Policy, listed on pages 123 to 144 of the report. Officers, would you like to add anything additional, please?
No, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hugh. There were no indications of questions in pre-briefing. I wonder if any members have questions on this item at this point, please. I can't see any indications, so we'll move to the recommendation. The recommendation is listed on page 138 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. I'm happy to propose it. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Henton. Can members please indicate if they wish to abstain?
I can see no abstentions, Chair.
Thank you, Alison. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I can't see any indications to the contrary, Chair. The recommendation is supported to Cabinet.
Many thanks, Alison. We move back now to the Cabinet Scrutiny agenda, and it's agenda item 4, urgent items. This is the one we always look forward to. And you'll be pleased to hear again that I don't have any urgent items for this afternoon. That now concludes the business of today's meeting, and thank you all for your contributions and for joining us this afternoon.
Diolch. Well.